for inviting me to do the talk on the dreaded Zoom. I guess we've all kind of got used to it a little bit, but it's pretty good to be doing a talk not only to a bar full of people at Elysium, but good to be doing it to Swansea and to be beaming back to Wales, where I lived for most of 30 odd years. And obviously we're live on the internet. So this is my studio, or let me call it the Seaside Studio. And I'll go into that a little bit, how that came about. And what I'll do in the first instance, I'm just going to run through a bunch of stuff in a little bit of detail. And then if we want to come back to anything, or if there's any questions, it's much easier for me to answer questions. I tend not to, on these kind of things, of anything really scripted, because it kind of comes across as a bit like reading it. So here we are. We've just about been told that things are going back into lockdown, so everyone's in a great mood. There's my exhibition was meant to, the solo exhibition was meant to open in April, which obviously rightly got cancelled or postponed at the Auxilary in Middlesbrough, which for those that don't know is an amazing venue. Literally is the Auxilary Project warehouse, and the gallery spaces and the studios are just amazing and not dissimilar to what you guys in Swansea have done. So that's due to open next Friday, which the studio's looking a little bare because things have gone off to be stretched. And then I found out late last night that it might not be, so we're just waiting for anything official. And then, of course, I'm really looking forward to taking part in Beep again, which is a great honour to be selected for a prize that has grown under its own direction and led by the people that need to lead it, which really came across in the last couple of outings. I think the last one in particular was just outstanding. I mean, I would say that because Jonathan's watching, but to do what they've done across Swansea and now doing it across South Wales and in further north is fantastic. And I know from being part of other groups such as Contemporary British Painting that we really appreciate what you guys are doing down there. So the studio, I'll just start with the studio. So I had a studio in Saltburn, which I left Wales a couple of years ago for various reasons, but mainly to take a new job. Got a really good studio eventually, and then lost that at the start of lockdown, which was kind of a blessing as well. But whilst it was a nice space, just situation wasn't ideal. And then obviously not needing or not being able to work on my larger works, I guess I should explain that I generally have two sets of work, concurrent work on the go, that are either for 2 years when I had a studio in Cardiff, with a great studio, worked not much bigger than about 30 by 25. And there was, I guess the reasoning behind that was to build up an intensity or like a visual kind of muscle memory of just making smaller works. And then the larger works kind of, they're not, the larger works are definitely not based on the smaller paintings. The two things run kind of concurrently. But I was unable to do the larger works, having lost the studio, just working at home like a lot of people. And not knowing where, and lost my job like a lot of people, had zero income, And then a lot of you will be aware of Artist Support Pledge, which was started by Matthew Burrows, where, if you don't know, briefly, you sell work up to £200, and once you reach a target of £1,000, you pledge to buy somebody else's work. And I remember the first couple of weeks and selling a couple of pieces, thinking, oh, I might reach £1,000 target and might be able to buy some more work, and it'll be a bit of cash that might get through the summer. But it was for a lot of people, not all, but it became like my main source of income, really. And because I worked so small before, I wasn't putting those small works up for cheap. But the studio's normally scattered with like a lot of sketches or things that I kind of occasionally work on. And then I started making new work specifically for the pledge. So that, for the last 3 or 4 months, that's kind of what I've been doing, was homeschooling and all the rest of it. And then we got noticed that the exhibition was going to go ahead, but we didn't quite have a date. So I needed to, and you could kind of get out and about a bit more. But Tees Valley Arts, who were in Middlesbrough, who then relocated to the Palace Hub in Redcar, which is 5 minutes from my house. And I wish I could show you. It's got a little bit dark now, but I won't try and disturb the camera or anything. But it's literally on the seafront. So I come out the front door of the studio, and I'm like 20 yards from the sea, which is kind of how I kind of grew up a lot of the time. I'm from this area. And so next door is the best ice cream shop in the world for me. Down the road is like one of the oldest recorded fish and chip shops. All the amusements for the South Wales gang. It's not dissimilar to Porthcawl and Coney Island, or I guess not dissimilar to Barry Island. And so Tees Valley Arts are there on the seafront, and they're trying to get different people to come in. And we kind of, because of lockdown, they weren't going to be able to use this room till about mid-September. So they very kindly offered the studio for free. There's kind of a little bit of exchange going on about working on kind of like like not an alternative local history, but kind of like what interests me about such seaside towns such as Barry, Redcar, Whitley Bay, and the surrounding post-industrial landscape and the natural landscape. Like Redcar is, like South Wales, is surrounded by, or was surrounded by, steelworks such as Port Talbot, and when I was living in Wales back in 2015, I had a show at Bay Art, a solo show, which was very much about that kind of the links between what was starting to influence the work more was that kind of post-industrial landscape. So you go from the sea to steel, the steel works or chemical works, and then you're into like the hills or the moors up here, and you've got the valleys of Wales. And that's still a concern, but kind of there was an intensity about being here in Redcar in a studio for 40 days, which I could have just kind of produced or finished up some works for the exhibition, but I really wanted to kind of use those 40 days as productively as possible, having not had a studio. And it's been amazing. So kind of it'd be easy to kind of ignore what was on your doorstep. I mean, the work was kind of concerned with these kind of things anyway, but some of the new work's really taken on, like directly kind of like I'm smack back in the middle of a very, I don't want to say the word run down, but it is run down and much needs a lot of love and care, which it's not currently getting, like a lot of these places. And it kind of fits in with a general tone of my work of kind of wanting to belong somewhere. So where the exhibition in Bay Art was kind of like almost like looking back at home and what reminded me of living in Wales, now I'm actually here and I'm not really, this is where I'm going to be. I'm back home and I live here. So the work's taken on a lot more kind of that meaningfulness to me. But of course, you've got to try and put that across in paintings, and not everybody will know those things, but it's just those kind of general similarities that I'm hoping that some of the paintings will. Firstly, that painting has got to have a resonance for me. It's got to get past 1,000,001. I wouldn't say quality control, but it's got to, because sometimes that not everything starts off as, not everything works as good or perfect, but and some things can kind of sit for a long time and come back a few years later. But it needs to have an immediacy and then some kind of resonance for me. And then I hope that it has a resonance for other people. So the exhibition is a mixture of work from the past 5 years, and the title of the exhibition is Dead Reckoning, which was chosen before we went into lockdown. And Dead Reckoning has a couple of meanings for me, but it's basic. The term comes from, it's like a Dutch nautical term, from when you're trying to replot your future course when you're lost at sea. And as the story goes, historically, that to do that Dutch sailors used to throw their dead into the water, and if they got lost, they could come back to this point and hopefully find where they were in a way to kind of move forward again, which I kind of liked in terms of paintings and what I was hoping to do with the show. And so to kind of connect some of that work back from 2015, there's maybe 2 or 3 paintings that were in that show that I'm going to show alongside here, because they were very much influenced by Teesside. So they're going to be shown here. There's a bunch of work done whilst I was in Cardiff. One that was shown, I think it was maybe in the last Beep Prize, maybe. And then the work that I've made since I've been back in the Northeast. But with this intensity of the 40 days and nights, I've decided to not so much, it's kind of that idea of dead reckoning, it's kind of almost like an anti-retrospective. I've kind of got it into my head. The day after the show opened, I turned 50, which it's significant in that it's not significant, and then it goes around in your head and it becomes more significant for other people. But it felt like a good marker. And instead of kind of looking back to maybe that show, I'm including 3, possibly 4 paintings that have been made in the last month, which could be an absolutely terrible decision, because normally I like to kind of sit with things. But because it's been made local and it's been shown local, it felt like it had an immediacy that I hope people will pick up on. One of those paintings was completed in the last week. It's not here, unfortunately, but you might be able to see it on my Instagram, which is of one of the coke ovens at the steelworks, the Norman Long Tower. which has massive kind of local resonance, but and there's a campaign to kind of save it from demolition. It's pretty iconic for a lot of people, but then if you know, I didn't work there, and the history of that building and the work conditions, but so there's like two sides to it. It's kind of like, do we keep it and preserve that bit of our heritage, or? But I don't want to glamorize that. I don't want to glamorize that kind of that heritage as well. Or I don't. There's lots of people using it for political gain, which I'm not particularly interested in. I just think it's a fantastic building, and it kind of, without the name of the tower, which is written across it. I was having a conversation with James from Tees Valley Arts today. It's like, unless you know, I wanted to paint something very specific. And generally, there's a lot of kind of ambiguous shapes or things that refer to different landscapes in the paintings, multi-layered kind of horizon levels and perspectives. But this is kind of the very first recognizable building that's appeared. But outside of like a local audience, it's got more of a, it's got kind of a slightly, it's very overpowering as a building. Kind of like almost becomes, you could read it in a kind of J.G. Ballard way, or, I mean, the Dead Reckoning, the title, also refers to a vehicle from a movie called Land of the Dead, which, for those that have not seen it, like a lot of Romero films, even though it's in the zombie franchise or genre, has kind of picks up on political leanings. And basically this tower, there's a tower in Land of the Dead where the elite and the rich, you have to be elite enough and rich enough to live in this tower, well, unless you're out in this pretty post-apocalyptic world. So that was kind of in the back of my head, because it kind of feels like that we're being governed by some kind of ruling elite. I mean, it's always felt like that. Let's be fucking clear about that. But so that kind of, the paintings are never ever, they're not political in a capital P kind of way, but you know, I'm very just, when I'm in the studio, I'm concerned about just painting and what makes a painting, why certain bits of a painting work, and that's what I'm thinking about. But it would be, I'd be being slightly naive if that, you know, the past 6 months hadn't crept in before, but it was always there, because it was always there in the work that was made in South Wales. There was work that referenced Port Talbot and the closure of the steelworks there. Some of the titles give clues to that kind of thing. But there's also this case that where I don't want to be, although I'm doing it now, I don't want painting to be like hitting people over the head and lecturing people about politics, and they're not, because I don't know who will be looking at them. Like if they've got to have a resonance for me, and hopefully resonance for my immediate peers and family and friends and support group and groups like Beep and Contemporary British Painting, that's all cool. But there's very much that there's we could be part of that elite without knowing, and so there's a much wider world out there, and you see that in Redcar, and you see that in you know, in Swansea, and like there's other people, and kind of like I'm interested in other people's takes on it. It's like I'm in a very privileged position, but it's what I do. This is what, it's my job. It's that I'm a painter. But kind of, I don't know if I would I'm hoping they've got a wider resonance than just like painting prizes and things like that. But maybe that's a grand claim, but I'm kind of prone to making these grand claims and then backtracking on them. So I guess the work has changed significantly after, or it started by the time of the 2015 solo show. The work started to, it was very kind of dark in tone, and the paintings became lighter, and the colour became quite a big thing. In that I was trying to learn all the time about it. And then lots of, once all of that kind of smoke and clouds and covering things up in veils of things, once all that started to be removed, it was like throwing off baggage and getting rid of things that I'd thought about before, or maybe things that were acting like as a bit of a crutch and hiding bits and pieces in the paint. Things were in paintings almost like to, sometimes there'd be like slightly comedic effect, or something to be a bit crass on purpose. And whilst I'm never ever bored of that kind of thing, but I wanted to find what was there, what was the structure of the painting, and what generally I found was that I'd been painting landscape paintings for quite a long time, and became more interested in the landscape, or my perception of it, other people's perceptions of it, and maybe just kind of taking notice of it a bit more. I think we've got a tendency just to overlook a lot of things. And then these kind of things, there was a point, and I said I'd mention this for someone who might be watching, but I started saying, like, if it looked like a boat, let it be a boat, or if it looked like a duck, let it go fucking quack, and just let it be there as a shape, as a form, and if it could hold its ground and demand to be in a painting, then why shouldn't it be in a painting? And it kind of got me thinking a lot about, I started to think a lot about sincerity and honesty, and I mean, it seems so long ago now, but like not being interested in what was perceived as cool or contemporary, because it's just a sham as well. But and then if I kind of feel I was going to end up painting fucking ducks and swans and boats, then that's the way it was going to go. And for there, things like that appear in a lot of the paintings. A lot of the beach paintings have parasols. And speaking of like grand claims for it, I was almost wanting to reclaim, reclaim that landscape or those cliches away from, God, I hate myself for saying this, but kind of reclaim it from like Sunday painters or amateur painters. And there's nothing wrong with those. I'm not in any way snobby towards that kind of work, because that's what people enjoy doing. But if the sea and the coast and the cliffs and the moors and the valleys has always been like such a momentous subject, I wanted to take it on. It's like, kind of, what else? If I wasn't going to do it, like, why? What was I scared of? There's, so many fantastic. Well, there's not that many brilliant painters of the sea, I think. But someone like, you've got like Courbet's, Delacroix, and then you've got people like Terry Setch from South Wales, with Merlin James. And I wanted to kind of like, what would it be to take on these subjects? So I'm not going to be saying I'm going to be painting cows, but you never know. If it works for the painting, it'll work for the painting. And that's kind of what interests me, or keeps me interested in painting, is that anything could potentially happen at any given time. And I decide if it exists within that painting. And that decision making can be like it doesn't fit and it jars, so it deserves to be there. Or it'd be like, you know, kind of there's 1,000,001 paintings that have got flying birds and flying ducks and stuff. And they become kind of like motifs to start paintings, which I did for quite a while, and they crop up quite a lot. Sometimes there's like a shorthand, and so like the V of a cartoon bird can come the edge of a tree. It could be the waves on a shoreline. It could be the edge of a cooling tower, or it could just be like the hills. And it's just adding these things in. And I think kind of that's where the smaller work has definitely helped now. Maybe I didn't see it before, is that I've constantly building up this kind of muscle memory, or a visual muscle memory, or even just in painting, sometimes I'll kind of find myself doing it. And then that's in that now that schools are back, when we think about that, but so drop off school, come here for 5 hours, do pick up, have something to eat, do family stuff, and then I've been coming back late on an evening, and doing like maybe another 4 to 5 hours, and that kind of work rate is really important to me. I mean, I go from either being very lazy or extremely going for it, paint wise. And when I say lazy, it's like I'm just not painting. I'll stop painting, and then it's kind of processing and looking at it, thinking about it. And so now that kind of moving between studios, that's become like a rhythm, really. So that's working pretty well so far, touch wood. And then I guess the scale of the paintings now have increased. You can't see them here, but going from 30 to 25, some of those will be in the exhibition, an example of which will be in Beep, and there's some even smaller works. I think they're about 10 by 15, which are going to be in Vitalistic Fanatics, an exhibition as part of Beep, curated by Paula MacArthur from Contemporary British Painting, who I believe is going to do a talk for you guys. And she talks much more eloquently than I do. And then I'm also in a show with some more small work organised between Elysium and Carl Bielik from Terrace Gallery. But the latest work here is about 2.5 meters by 2 meters. And that's opened, like all of the small paintings are very kind of intense and dense. The colours quite built up. Whereas having larger here, more things have emerged. I can see more shapes. There's definite, more specific references to where I live now, and not something I've done before, but I want to focus that into be about a very particular area of East Cleveland, which is an area I'm very familiar with from growing up. And it's part of Teesside, which is like Middlesbrough, an area, and kind of like looking at very specific places where I go on a regular basis, and then looking at some small fishing communities, such as Skinning Grove and the coast along there, kind of like old ironstone villages, iron mining villages, where there's lots of like abandoned buildings, similar. So they're starting to crop up quite a lot. But but really the show, if it goes ahead, it really is that kind of, it's like that takes off from where the Quiet Riot show at Bayard finished and kind of fills in the work I did with LLE Gallery, Liam McConnor, and then the work that I'm sure with a left contemporary, and it's just come. I mean, that privilege idea is, you know, we're all pretty aware of how lucky or unlucky we are. Even though my show was cancelled, I already had an online show ready to go with a left contemporary, so that went live. I've done various other online things for contemporary rich painting. I'm just kind of hoping that it was just good timing that the solo show came when Beep would be on, and these other shows. And with being, you know, the dreaded 5-0, it felt like that was like a good marker just to kind of say, all right, this is where I'm at now, and like where do I want to be in 20, 25, 30 years time, which again, it's like that's a kind of big thing to be thinking about. But I think up until this point, it just feels like getting started, which is a funny thing to say when you've been doing it. You know, it's 27 years since I graduated from Cardiff, and to be just getting going could really, but it could flatten you out if you think. But it's kind of like, well, let's put it there as a marker and see where we go from there. So there's certain things that, you know, I want to do. I did a lot of work in a residency in Argentina that I've not really explored a bit since I got back a few years ago. But really, I mean, what I'll probably do after the show is after that big showings, I'll generally retreat as much as possible, which a lot of people will be pleased about, and start another series of smaller works to build up another set of kind of visual muscle memory. And I don't really know where that's going to go. There's some loose ideas about doing some still life painting. You know, a lot of the work, I think the show that was at Mission, that was at Bayard, that Liam O'Connor curated, was like looking at interiors and exteriors, and the work definitely has been about exteriors. So I'm kind of looking at a few more kind of interior still life paintings, but I don't really know. It's kind of like it's all a bit too much to think about, really. It's like fucking Godzilla could come out of the sea tomorrow. Jesus, aliens could come. Who knows? But so just kind of like keeping that studio practice going. I've taken a studio at Auxilary, which is a really small space compared to this, and that's in a more of like community of people. And looking forward to Beat, man. It's kind of, it's just, I mean, I miss all those good people in Wales, most of them, and it would be great to visit and see everybody. And then we've got a small show in Chicago next year, which kind of came out with just contacts through Instagram, which I guess like with Artist Support Pledge, I've kind of noticed over the past few years that Instagram has become that. I didn't really want to do it, but it's just, I just couldn't live without that now. And it's, I mean, I have other support, but it's Instagram kind of is, for the time being, it's responsible for about, maybe I used to like 60%, but I'd say maybe like 75% of opportunities or sales or our correspondence go through that. So we'll see where that goes. Doing a new website and hopefully have a catalogue out by the end of the year, which will maybe kind of summarise where we're at and kind of put a marker down, like throwing a dead body into the sea and dead reckoning.